note. All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining in this morning to talk about college readiness. We are a pretty small group, so I think we will start with some introductions. But first, let me get my screen share set up. All right, hopefully everybody can see that. All right, I'm Stephanie Grimes. I am a curriculum designer and educational consultant. Most Maryland Out of School Time Network is one of my clients. And for them, I worked on as lead author on the College and Career Readiness Toolkit. So we wrote that back in and published that back in 2020, right smack in the middle of the pandemic. And that's what we're going to be referencing and talking about a little bit today, and sharing some materials and tools and resources that are included in that resource. I'm a former kindergarten teacher, so I taught kindergarten in Harford County Public Schools for about 5 years at the very beginning of my career. And since then, I've really been working mostly in out of school time, leading and creating after school programs. And the bulk of that time was spent as director of programs at Digital Harbor Foundation in Baltimore. I'm a Baltimore native. I've lived here all my life, grew up in Highlandtown, and now we live just outside the city. So yeah, I'd like to invite you all to introduce yourselves, just quickly give me some context about who you are, where you're coming in from, and what drew you into this webinar today. That'll help as we're sort of going through. Anybody would like to volunteer to go first?
I can start us off. My name is Andrea, and I'm here with Baltimore Promise to just kind of take notes and provide support. So I'm going to hang out in the background, but it's nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you. Thanks, Andrea, for being here. Let's see. I've got 3 other folks on here. I'm just going to call you by name, but I'm not sure if that's your name or not, but that's what's on the screen. And I'm just going to go in order down my window here. Michael, are you around? Oh, let's go boys and girls team. Nice. Summer coaches for the summer program.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, we are the Let's Go Boys and Girls job coach team for our summer programming. So we're here because we're doing a college career readiness curriculum, and we'd love to learn from someone. So.
Great. Welcome. Happy to have you all here. All right. Mohammed, if you're around, or if you would like to put in the chat, either one is fine. All right. Seems like they may be away. And then we have Beadley.
Hi, everyone. My name is Diane Davidson. I am the founder of Beadley Speaking Jewelry and Beadley Speaking Kids. And I'm really excited to learn more information as I continue to expand our curriculum. We provide an experience for kids where art meets wellness. So our program is centered around wellness topics as well as jewelry making. So it would be good to know a little bit more of what I could add to the content.
That's awesome. And it's Diane?
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. It's good to see you all this morning. Mohammed, if you come back and you'd like to introduce yourself, you can do so in the chat. We'll see it there. But otherwise, we are going to get things rolling here. All right, so we're going to start off with a quick poll, and you can just drop your responses in the chat here. So the question is, at what age do you think students should start preparing for college and career readiness? And your answers are A, ages 5 to 10, B, ages 11 to 13, C, 14 to 18, or D, over 18. So if everybody wants to just drop their response in the chat box. All right, Dion thinks C, looking at that 14 to 18 age. B, 11 to 13. So we've got a vote for sort of the high school age and sort of the middle school age. So yeah, Michael, we actually are in agreement about that. Actually, over at Most, we've been talking more and more about the possibility of beginning this work in elementary school. But the toolkit is really written very intentionally to bring college and career readiness activities down to the middle school level. And so you'll see that as we go through the things we're going to share today and talk about. But we've also been thinking about how we can bridge this down even younger because the work is so important and often so neglected. So I just want to start out with a little quote here. The evidence base strongly supports deploying after school and summer programs and partnerships to develop students' readiness skills for enrolling in post-secondary education and joining the workforce. And this is from Betsy Brand, who is the executive director of the American Youth Policy Forum. In a research brief, she goes on to say that, schools are completely overburdened with this work. And often that means that students are not getting this access or this instruction or resources and orientation to this whole massive college process and information related to that in school. And so using out of school time as a place to really enhance and support what they may or may not be getting in school. So here OST providers can play really three main roles that we've sort of organized the information around. And this is around raising career and college aspirations, fostering those 21st century skills, which we know to be critically important, and connecting youth to the workforce, right, in ways that schools may not be able to access those community resources. So this is particularly true for STEM careers, but not only applies to STEM careers. You may relate to this. I certainly know from my time in out of school, the feedback that we got from families and from youth themselves was that we were making impact with them and connecting with them in different ways from their school leaders and teachers and things we're able to. So OST programs are very well positioned to be making a deeper impact on youth in the areas of college and career readiness for a few reasons. One of them being we can take a one-to-one versus a one-to-many approach, right? A lot of after-school programs focus on a smaller group of youth than, like, say, a school classroom or a school grade, for instance. Able to reach youth in ways that school personnel may not be able to, right? We tend to focus a lot on building those youth adult relationships in ways that schools aren't able to, simply because of a capacity issue. We may have better developed relationship with families, offer a broader range of experiences, and better able to cater to individual needs. So while schools typically bear most of the responsibility for this college and career readiness, OST programs might actually be more poised to make a bigger impact. We can play a critical role in starting early and continue it, excuse me, incorporating career and college readiness, culture, activities, and mindset continuously throughout our time with youth. We can provide guidance and support, even inspiration for students' careers and college pathways. Excuse me. Sorry about that. and can also help to remove barriers and open new avenues to students. Again, sort of working outside the constructs and all of the time constraints that schools have, we have a lot more flexibility with our time and how we spend it and the things that we really want to emphasize. So that's what led us to creating the College and Career Readiness Toolkit. Again, this is a resource that comes out of Maryland Out of School Time Network, and it's a comprehensive guide to help middle and high school out of school time programs get really laser focused on building 21st century skills and supporting young people as they navigate the complex and complicated world of planning for advanced education and careers. The toolkit is available for free on the MOST website and is hosted in PDF form so that the units, resources, and toolkit can be downloaded for use. So throughout today's presentation, I'm going to be sharing links in the chat. And at the end, I have a PDF document that contains all of the links I'm going to share and then some for the different activities and things that we're going to be referencing inside and outside the toolkit. So you can open them up as we go through, or you can just save them all for later. Again, I'm going to share with you all a PDF that has all of the links contained in it as well. So don't feel like if you miss one, you're not really going to miss it. But there's the toolkit link if you wanted to check that out. So you can navigate through that if you'd like. So let's talk a little bit more about the toolkit. The purpose of the toolkit really is three main facets: to provide practical how-tos, activities, and additional resources for you all to help bridge the information, awareness, and opportunity gap for your students, to increase exposure opportunities for youth in terms of exploring career and college options, and then to really bring intentional career and college readiness activities down to that middle school level, as I mentioned earlier. Here's a peek at what's included in the units. So there are 6 units to the toolkit, focusing on a range of from overarching principles, guiding you through making these kinds of decisions. What are the foundational skills that students need to be successful in these areas? A big section on career readiness, a whole section and unit devoted to alternative post-secondary options, right? So looking in addition to college, what are the other options that are available to youth, and really exploring some of those in depth. And then a whole unit on college readiness, which is really where we're going to focus most of our effort and interest today. So included in each unit, this is what it looks like. There's an overview of the area of focus, lots of relevant research and links out to supporting research for everything that's mentioned or highlighted in the toolkit. Specific how-tos and guided activities so that you all can take this and really use it right out of the gate. Lots and lots and lots of links to external resources, right? So it's definitely a curation of the research and resources that exist in this work beyond just recreating the wheel. And then in a lot of cases, there are accompanying student worksheets, activity guides, and supplemental student resources, which you'll see some of today. Again, we wrote this in the middle of the pandemic, so COVID-19 was certainly top of mind at the time of authoring this, and where processes or approaches or data have changed, or there were closures or delays, and some of them may just still be ongoing, information and resources have been provided and highlighted in the toolkit at where those changes and notations are. So our goal is really for folks to use this toolkit to make difference for the youth participating in their programs, right? And that's by opening up options to them as early as possible, increasing the quality and frequency students are exposed to career and college readiness, and creating more opportunities to practice and apply the skills necessary so that they can be successful in navigating this world. So today we're here to really focus in on the college readiness piece. So I have another little poll for you. I'd like you to respond in the chat box, please. How much CCR is already embedded in your work? And just to be clear, CCR is shorthand for college and career readiness. So anywhere that you see that, that's what we're talking about. So we've got a scale sort of 1 to 5 here. The end down toward 1 being currently sort of all career focused in your program. The middle, so 3, and leaning in towards the 2s and 4s. Currently all non-CCR youth development. So are there things you're just not doing any of this yet? You're really just starting out with interest in this. And then 5 being you're really a college focused program already. So if you could just drop a number in the chat, drop your response in the chat, let us know where you are on that spectrum. I see Dion's talking about being at a 3, right? Yep. Looks like Let's Go Boys and Girls is more focused in the mostly non-developed or non-CCR, but with a little bit of a career focus. That's great. It just helps to know where folks are coming in at. All right, so first off, I wanted to talk about a few sort of main tenets for the lens of the toolkit and our approach to college readiness as a whole. So the biggest part being starting with the end in mind. The ultimate goal of going to college is a career, right? At least that's what it should be. So when students know about the career they're interested in, they can then work backwards from there to figure out all the other pieces. So questions that you can use with your youth to start getting them thinking about what they're, and I say end really loosely, right? We're going to talk more about this in a couple of slides here. But that end point is not a static point, right? Of course, careers change, jobs change, the landscape of industries available and all of that changes, especially these days, so quickly. So questions you can get them, you can use to start getting youth to think about what they want for their life. It sort of skips over the college piece or the post-secondary education piece in general and looking more at the career piece to come backwards from that. What type of education or experience do I need for the job that I'm interested in or the career that I'm interested in? What's the expected entry-level salary range, right? And that might seem like an odd question, but that is really important when it comes down to making decisions about college. If you're going to come out of college, and your first year salary is going to be $40,000 as a first year teacher, that should factor into your decisions about how much you should spend on college, right? Because you're likely going to have loans or student debt that you need to then start paying off. And so making sure that that balance isn't too out of whack. How much will your education cost, right? That factors into that. So looking at the financial part of it, not just the experience part of it. Which learning institutions are best suited to your career, right? This may not be a 4-year college. The toolkit very much takes a career-focused approach versus a college-focused approach, because we know that college is one way. It is the primary way these days, but it is only one way for youth to get into a career. So the goal is not necessarily for every youth to go to a 4-year college. That might not be the best fit for them for any variety of reasons. And then the final question here is really looking at what extracurricular activities might be of interest and get me more experience related to the careers that I might be interested in. What kinds of things do I want to explore? What do I need to learn more about? And we're asking youth of very young ages to start making decisions about their future, right? We're starting at like 11 and 12 years old. With the options for school choice here in Baltimore and beyond, magnet programs, CTE programs, etc. These are often seen as the first steps towards college and career decisions, right? So we're asking them to look forward about decisions that they have to make in order to choose high school and what kinds of activities they want to be involved in at high school and what they want to focus on in high school. And these decisions are often made with limited exposure to the potential careers and variety of post-secondary options available to youth. So keeping that in mind, and really, if we can start exposing them to more career exploration and college and career awareness early on, right? Again, talking about how can we're starting to think about how we can bring this down into elementary school, but really in middle school, they definitely need to be having these things offered to them so that they can start to get a picture as they start to make these early choices. And on that note, it is super critical that youth of all ages know that changing their mind is okay and encouraged, and that they can do that at any stage and at any age. They are not locked into these decisions for the rest of their lives, right? The pressure that youth have put on them to make these kinds of decisions and work with their families to make these decisions in some cases. It can be kind of debilitating, right? And paralyzing in some ways. So really wanting them to know that their tastes and preferences are probably going to change. They're going to learn of new opportunities. The landscape is going to change for jobs and careers over the lifespan of, as they're working their way through middle and high school and college or whatever they decide to do after high school. New industries might develop, right? Especially in this sort of technology age that we live in. And they might just simply change their mind, and that's all okay. I'm sure many of us sitting in this room today sitting in this Zoom room today can relate to that. And the final piece, just as sort of a introduction, is to really know your role, right? You as OST providers, it can be really easy to get caught up in wanting to do more, wanting to do all of the things. And the long-term goal for career and college readiness programs is clear, right? We want young people thriving in their chosen future work, whatever that looks like for them. But we also need to understand that it takes a village to support young people along this journey. There's no single person, program, or institution that can do it alone. So it's critical to understand that your role, or understand the role that your program has in the whole ecosystem of support for young people in order to be college and career ready. So by being clear on your program's role in supporting youth, you can really identify and prioritize your approach, what you are able to uniquely offer, right? What perspectives, what opportunities, what lens are you looking at things through that maybe is different from someone else's approach or the other program's approach or school's approach or at home's approach. And then identify the gaps where youth might need more support or resources, and can you offer something that is meaningful in that space? So some questions for you all to consider as you start thinking about your role is, what is your program model? How do you most tangibly support young people in getting college and career ready? Do you support youth directly, and in what ways? Do you want to be supporting them in a different way? What aspects of college and career readiness can you directly attribute to your program? And what can or do you offer that no one else can? And these will help you in data collection and things like that. There's a whole section in the toolkit around data collection specifically for CCR work. And so getting clear on some of these questions can really be helpful in clarifying your goals and your intentions. So looking at, there's sort of a shift that happens right from middle school to high school as we're talking about college and career readiness. So during middle school, it's really important to provide a wide variety of college and career focused experiences for youth and expose them to many different possible career paths, right? They're still kids, right? We're talking about 11, 12, 13-year-olds. You should be able to envision themselves at that point in a variety of career fields, right? They shouldn't be necessarily laser focused on any one career or path or things like that. And integrating information about the wide variety of career paths available throughout the curriculum should be an active focus of programs serving middle school youth. And so these areas of focus we've really identified as self-discovery, but we're going to talk a little bit more about what all of these look like. Self-discovery, career exploration, and building 21st century skills. Also, developing a plan for reaching future goals and starting to think about that, and exposure to a wide variety of experiences and pathways, as we've said. Guiding questions for this section look like, what makes me me? How do my interests, preferences, talents, and skills inform me about the careers I might be interested in? What skills do I need to be successful in my future? What do I want for my future? And what are the options available? And then when we move into high school, we're really shifting that focus. And this is where we're actually like taking action on those pieces. So career exploration is still in this category, but ideally it has a focus, right? So ideally, as they've moved from middle school into high school, and as they move through high school, youth are able to get a clearer picture of what they want for themselves, and start limiting those options. And that's still based on that self-discovery piece, right? And still exploring, how have my interests and preferences changed? What new skills do I have? How does that inform what I'm interested in the world? What new things are on the horizon that weren't there a few years ago? Really making and taking action on post-secondary decisions, right? And high school is definitely the time where we're starting to apply to colleges and look at post-secondary education options. Preparing youth for the workplace is another piece of this. So we shift that building 21st century skills and sort of expand and narrow it sort of at the same time, really focusing in on a lens of workplace success and what does that start to look like and what are the skills you need to be successful. And then actually shifting toward actually planning the future. So again, we move from consideration to action. Guiding questions for high school look like, based on my interests, preferences, talents and skills, which careers am I most interested in and what I like to focus on? What education or experience is required for me to secure a job in the career fields of interest to me? And what skills or knowledge do I need to be successful in the workplace? And we really recommend doing all of this work through the lens of a CCR culture. And so there's a whole section in the toolkit where we talk about building a CCR culture. And so I'm going to drop a link in the chat to that section where some of these resources come from and some of these talking points come from. So what is a college and career readiness culture? It's composed of several factors that are intentionally designed and implemented to increase access to and success in post-secondary education. So it's really looking at what do youth need and how can we best support them and design our program and design activities and work that support them in that success. So these factors include the environment in which they work and what where your program, how your program is set up. Attitudes and practices in schools and communities that encourage students and families to obtain the information, tools, and perspective to be successful. So note that it's students and their families. Oops. There we go. Some of the goals of college and career readiness culture is for youth to believe that they have a great future ahead of them, right? We want them, there's this saying of like, you have to see it to believe it. So we really need them to see that they can be successful and they can have a great future. Youth to believe that they can plan and prepare for many options after high school, right? And that's arming them with information and knowledge and experience so that it's not intimidating or threatening in any way. Expanding knowledge on possible post-secondary pathways, right? Looking at what's available outside of just a four-year college experience. Generating important values such as appreciation for learning, the desire to succeed, and motivation to become a lifelong learner, right? That's crucially important. And then the academics, professional, and social emotional skills are developed in this culture, right? So it's really looking at sort of the same facets we've been talking about. We have three areas of focus for establishing a CCR culture. One, offer students opportunities to learn about a variety of options for their future. This includes careers and the education that they require. That's so important, right? If youth want to be a mechanic, for example, or own their own auto shop and be a business owner, that's looking much more at sort of business and entrepreneurship versus like a four-year college degree, probably, right? They're going to need some sort of technical school or trade school. It's going to be the most appropriate place for them, with some maybe business classes at a community college or something like that. And you can begin this focus and this exposure as early as elementary school, but it absolutely should be a focus in middle school. So if you're working with middle school youth, you should be working on this already. Your program and staff should convey the expectation that all youth can prepare for the opportunity to attend and be successful in a post-secondary experience, whether that's college or some alternative. And all stakeholders, your staff, the families include, centered in your program, the community supporting your program are all on the same page and communicate the same message or a similar message of high expectations for the future of their youth. And that's not unattainable high expectations. That's high expectations with a support system and scaffolds in place to help youth really reach those high expectations. So talking about what can you do in the summer, right? If you're talking about through this lens of CCR culture, what are things that you can do right away as your programs are getting ready to kick off in the coming weeks, I assume. So you can be a champion for all youth in your programs. And when we say all youth, every time we say that, we're talking about not just those who are, quote, the best or have the most resources or are likely college bound, right? These are all youth. These are the youth who are not likely to be college bound based on their their home situations or their life situations. Sorry, I just saw a chat question pop up. Do you have information on vocational paths? Yes, so there's a whole section, unit 5 in the toolkit. Let me just drop that link again. Here's the link to the toolkit in the chat. So there's a whole section, unit 5 is focused all on post-secondary alternatives. And so I don't know that I can't remember if there's a specific one pager that's in there, but there are definitely lots of resources that one could be generated from that. Creating positive relationships among staff and youth, right? Building trusting and mutually respectful relationships can make all the difference for youth in your programs. So really putting that time in and putting effort into to that piece is so critical. Youth need to feel like they've got someone that they can rely on and someone that they trust to share information with and really help guide them through this process. Open opportunities and experiences to all youth, again, not just those who are already likely college bound. Starting the conversation, right? Just start the conversation. If that's all you have time for or bandwidth for this summer, that's a great place to start. Starting the conversation about future goals, aspirations. Do not wait. If you can avoid it, don't wait until high school to have these conversations, because by then they're already caught up in the process, right? If we can build their confidence early and really expose them to options and awareness and increase their awareness young, by the time they get to high school, they know I feel like youth have more confidence in their ability to make these decisions, and those decisions not be so scary and intimidating. Connect with and engage families early and often. Involving families in this can only strengthen your practices. Offer youth opportunities to demonstrate and practice leadership skills. So whether that looks like specific roles or leadership positions in your organization or opportunities to help you plan activities, all of that can be very confidence building and leadership skill building. Ensure your physical space looks, feels, and sounds like a place that promotes college and career readiness. Set specific goals related to your CCR for your programs and measure the impact. Again, there's a section in the toolkit on data. It's in unit 1. And encourage and seek buy-in at every level to support your CCR culture, right? So making sure that everybody in your organization and all the supporters of your organization are on the same page about that. I'm going to drop a link in the chat to a resource that gives more information about how to create CCR culture in OST programs. So then we're going to move into college discovery, right? So we're talking about sort of this CCR culture, right? And really building a culture of college going. And that's often, you may see it phrased that way as well. Then we're going to move into this discovery phase, which is really made up of two key aspects. One of them being self-discovery and self-awareness, and then college awareness, right? So what do I know about myself? What do I know about what happens after high school? So the CCR process that most benefits youth focuses in on building self-awareness, learning about potential education and career pathways, developing a plan for future goals. A wide variety of college and career focused experiences are provided, and youth should always be able to envision themselves in a variety of possible post-secondary pathways, right? These are things we've talked about already. This is a process. So the importance of self-discovery and awareness in that process is that in order to envision themselves in a variety of career fields, youth need to begin by understanding and knowing themselves. What do they like? What do they dislike? What are their learning preferences? How does their personality influence their choices? What are their learning styles, right? How much more information can they learn about themselves? This will help them to be able to envision different paths for themselves. And it's really the first step in our sequence for that reason. The most successful outcomes for this whole process is for them to know as much about themselves at that point in their lives as possible. And so if we can equip youth with self-knowledge and the ability to know and trust themselves, they'll always be able to return to that as they navigate along the college and career pathway. So that's it's gonna include pivots and changes and making new decisions all along the way. If we or enable them early on to be able to understand themselves and tap into that, they can use that as a guide as they work through that process when you may no longer be working with them or have that influence over them. So the toolkit, of course, contains a lot of self-discovery activities. And so in middle school, we're looking at personality and interest inventories, and the toolkit links to some of those. But we've also designed a couple of specific activities here. So there's an activity called the This Is Me Web. And this activity leads middle school youth through the exercise of taking an inventory of their interests, what they know about themselves already, with a lens on how this might help them make choices about high school. So if you're working this summer with incoming youth who are currently in middle school or maybe going to be freshmen in high school in the coming school year, you could still do this activity with them because it talks about what do I know about myself and what kinds of activities might I be interested in high school. So although they might already be enrolled in a high school, they can start to think about classes they may be interested in or extracurricular activities that they might be interested in through that lens of self-interest, but also career. And then there's a school alignment research activity that follows up on that activity, follows up on the This Is Me activity. And this one's really aimed at helping middle schoolers align their interests with possible high school activities and programs. So these two work sort of together and can certainly be done with youth you might be working with this summer. So I'm going to drop links to those two activities in the chat. And again, for any of our newcomers, you don't need to worry about if you miss a link or anything like that, or you don't have the context for the link. At the end, I'm going to share a PDF that has all of the links that I'm sharing included as well. So in high school, these self-discovery activities really take the form of an interest inventory, and this leads youth through the process of taking an inventory of their interests, strengths, weaknesses, and desires for their future, and then pairs it with an exercise in values alignment. And then there's the career alignment research activity that is the second. So these are designed to be implemented in sequence, right? So interest inventory, then the career alignment research. And youth use the information gathered in their interest inventory activity to research careers that align with their interests, strengths, and desired lifestyle. So really getting them to connect those pieces and bridge those gaps, right? As a young person, sure, being a marine biologist sounds really cool and might look really great, but I wasn't good at math and science as a kid. So that might not be the best career choice for me. And I might need to start thinking about that. Like, oh, if I'm very passionate about that and I really want to be interested in that, I'm going to need to step up my game in terms of my science classes and really start to focus on that. So it can be a really informative process informing youth, helping youth discover information about themselves. And that's so empowering. So I just dropped 2 more links in there for those high school activities. Now, college, we know is we probably know is the most popular post-secondary pathway, of course, right? 65% of all jobs were projected to require some type of post-secondary education and training beyond high school in 2020. Now, notice that that says some type of post-secondary education, not necessarily college. But of the estimated 55 million job openings in 2020, 35% required at least a bachelor's degree, 30% required some college or an associate's, and 36% require education beyond high school, just sort of generically. And that might fall under some, trade school or technical schools, things like that. Early awareness of college and post-secondary education is crucial to success beyond high school. The fact that most of this work in schools waits until high school, I think is doing a disservice to youth, because there's so much information to learn that it shouldn't only be focused on what do you have to do in these 4 years, and there's so much work to do in these 4 years, specifically if you're interested in going to college, and that is the pathway for you, which we know it is for most youth. So the goal of college awareness is to really create the expectation for all students that they can and will go to college. So again, that builds off of some of that CCR culture piece, to prepare youth and families with the information and resources necessary to get there. And beginning as early as possible increases the likelihood that youth will be prepared when the time comes to begin actively pursuing post-secondary education options. And when the time comes is high school. But often we're waiting for high school to be even talking about college awareness with students. So we have this little infographic here about beginning early, youth and families, and activities for all youth. So beginning as early as possible increases the likelihood that youth will be prepared. We've already talked about that. It's important to begin integrating these as early as possible, starting even in elementary school if you work with young students. And early college awareness activities and strategies should really be designed to help educate youth and families on the types of experiences and prepare them for the college selection, admissions, financial aid, and what to expect in general. College awareness becomes even more important when working with low income or first generation students, because oftentimes these are students that lack the awareness of the costs of college, the availability of student aid, the job market, or the economic gains of college attendance, right? And so really focusing in on financial literacy and how those pieces work together and what the job market looks like, right? Those are really important skills. Again, sort of going back to that activities for all youth. And when traditionally underrepresented students aren't fully aware of the benefits of college or the availability of resources to help them complete college, they already start further behind on the path to college than their better served peers. And so the research definitely supports that as a fact, and really looking at how can we do right by those students that we serve in our programs, and make sure that they're getting equal access and information. So what can OST programs do in the summer when talking about college awareness or college discovery, right? So these self-discovery and college awareness pieces. This might look like developing partnerships with local colleges and universities. We're lucky here in Baltimore, we have a ton of colleges and universities that exist in the world or exist in the local area. Designing activities related to college awareness for youth and their families. So how can we start to integrate families into this work? Creating opportunities for youth to experience college, right? This might look like, we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the next section, but this might look like campus tours or visits, finding videos on YouTube of campus tours and youth who are in college and what that looks like for them. And, they have these kind of like day in the life videos that you can find. Helping youth research college and all the components of that process of getting there, providing financial literacy education to youth and their families, offering to help with the college application process, right? And this all depends on what age youth you're working with, right? If you're working with youth who are in upper high school grades, right? 10, 11, 12, some of these things might be more applicable to you than if you're working with younger high school or middle school students. There's a resource that I'm going to share here that is college awareness games and activities from a program in Oregon called Gear Up. So I've included that as a resource. The link is in the chat there. Sparking interest in conversations, getting you thinking about the possibilities for their work, for their future. And I have in here also, keep doing the great work you already do, right? You're already doing something with youth that's valuable, whether that's relationship building or 21st century skill building, right? Building up those communication skills and those collaboration skills and creativity. Really, keep doing that. Don't neglect the thing that makes your program awesome and special and draws kids in the first place. But really, how can you work on top of that? So this all comes from this resource, how to promote college awareness in your OST program, or a lot of it comes from there, and that's linked there. Yeah, so Mary, thanks for your question in the chat. Mary's question is, how do we reconcile the youth's desire to be a marine biologist and the school system he is enrolled in? Yep, the toolkit is helpful, but how do you let youth understand that the school system has responsibility as well? It's not all on him if his education is not aligned with his desires for himself. Many stories of teachers telling Black kids they can't be a certain profession. Absolutely. And personally, I'm not sure how to reconcile that, right? It is a huge undertaking to try to undo those damaging messages and to support youth when you don't have, I want to use the word control, but I don't think that's quite the right word, influence over what their day-to-day life looks like, right? School, we as outside of school time providers, sure, we can maybe collaborate with the school system or their school specifically. But in terms of supporting youth outside of that, we have to do the best job we can, right? To try to instill these messages. And again, I think if we're able to, it goes back to that starting early. If we're able to instill that message in them early, that they can do whatever their hearts desire, right? That it might take more work for certain youth, that they might have that some youth are going to have different hurdles and challenges to overcome than other youth are going to have based on not just the school system that they're in, but the school itself that they're enrolled in, right? Because we know there's inequities across a school system, from one area to another, one neighborhood to another, community to another. But really, if we can build up that confidence early on, I think that helps to help them envision that pathway for themselves and take the certain steps and make the sacrifices that they need to make to really show up in school and really do the work that they can and make the most of the situation despite the circumstances that they're in. But this is also a place where partnerships, right? Not just looking at colleges and universities, although those can be good partnerships for OST programs, because you can that'll give you inroads that schools may not have and relationships that schools may not have built to be able to support youth in different ways, right? But community partnerships will also be crucially important. Again, it's this whole mentality of it takes a village, right? And for students who are in situations like that, where they've been told they can't seek a certain profession because they're not whatever, you know, fill in the blank there, is ridiculous. And it's super unfortunate that those messages even exist. And it turns my stomach that is the situation, as I'm sure for most of you. There's a comment here from Michael: reinforce, show visuals of people in that career that look like them. That's super important. And be relentless in your support. So the toolkit has a lot of resources on some of those things that can support that, right? This visuals, there's a, if we have time at the end, I'll try to pull it from the presentation we did on Monday about career readiness, but there's a great resource from Junior Achievement that is a library of career, it's like a career library video library. And so it's videos of people talking about different jobs and careers. And there's a diverse representation in those in most of those videos, and a wide variety of careers. It's about connecting them with mentors and community, just community people, right? Even if they're not in a mentoring capacity, bringing in folks that, yeah, Mary, I'll definitely try to pull that video. And if I don't get a chance before we wrap, or pull that link, if I don't get a chance before we wrap up, actually what I'll do is I'll just drop the career links in here too, and you guys can have those. So the link is in there as well. And that's such a great question. Thank you for asking that. I think it's an important conversation that folks continue to have as we do this work and sort of start to, you know, try to make good on these youth and try to make impact where we can, and let them know that they can be successful, and that, but that school piece is real hard. It's real hard to overcome. And I've seen it personally in some of the youth that I've worked with who are now adults and really struggling because school failed them. And as an OST program, there's only so much we can do as individuals and as an organization, but that doesn't mean we should stop trying and try to do as much as we can for those youth. So thanks, Mary, for getting us thinking about that. So we move from this sort of college discovery, right, which is self-discovery, college awareness, into what we're calling college exploration. So this is, again, taking that next step. So it looks kind of like this funnel, right? Once youth have learned some things about themselves and built awareness of the possibilities of college and post-secondary education, we're moving on to actual exploration, going deeper. Okay, this is what I got a kind of overview of what I'm like, what the landscape is like. Now, how do I start to like funnel down and sort of narrow that pathway for myself and those opportunities? And I don't mean narrow the opportunities, but I mean narrow the sites of those opportunities, right? Start to get focused on what you are wanting to pursue. So it's an opportunity here to go deeper, to look more closely. So this looks like targeting research, meaningful experiences, connection to the possibilities, right? So if we think of it as a funnel, you've got sort of self-discovery and awareness at the top. You're moving into then exploration, which then funnels into action, which is, these are the programs I want to apply to. These are the careers I'm considering, right? You've got sort of a narrow set from this bigger pool of information that you've been presented with. So these next few slides are really going to be tangible things that you all can do in your programs if you're working on college readiness and college exploration. So exploring a college campus, right, starting right off the bat with college visits, encouraging folks to do this physically, right, in person visits, because that can tell somebody a lot about the school that they may not learn otherwise. There are lots of schools, I think many schools, if not most schools at this point, offer virtual campus tours, and they've become very popular, and they're great. And certainly were great during the pandemic, when I mean, how students made choices for all of these things and started during this period of not being able to go in person and not being able to see it and feel it and experience what it's like to be there and moving around the space. So these virtual tours are great, and they're can be a really good tool for narrowing down a student's options by first visiting schools virtually and then deciding if they're interested in visiting in person. So we recommend this sort of like path, or these are some activities that you can do is like prior to these in-person visits, do these virtual campus tours. There's a resource for that. I'm going to actually just drop all these resources right now into the chat for anybody who'd like to take a look at them. But we have a virtual campus tour summary document that's in there that's directly for youth use. And everything, again, in the toolkit is a PDF. So you can take it, you can download it, you can make changes to it, create your own from that document, use it as inspiration, however you see fit. Watch videos and conduct research on what to look for during college visits. I've got a couple linked there. Once visits are scheduled, prepare youth for their visit, right? There's a college visit guide. Again, that's an activity sheet that sort of works through sort of what to do when you're there. Identify all the must-do activities and research during their visit. And there's a couple of resources there. One from the toolkit, the campus visit scorecard comes from College Bound, which has a ton of great resources. Invite youth to reflect on their visit and share what they've learned with others. So sort of this like reflection piece is super important, right? What did I think of that? How did that feel for me? What was that experience like? Can I envision myself there? And if the answer is no, then that's not the right choice for you, probably. Looking at financial literacy as another key component of college readiness and this college preparation pathway. So it's important that youth learn financial literacy as a part of this pathway and in part of their preparation for college and career and for adult life in general, really. If they're not taught youth financial responsibility, youth will tend to adopt the same relationship with money that the adults in their lives have, which might not be productive, right? If we can give them even just a little bit more knowledge, that might be helpful. And they are more likely to keep those, if we teach them good, proper money management skills and good financial habits and the reasoning behind those financial habits, right? That reasoning part is really important. Why should I do it that way? If my mom or my dad or my aunt or my uncle or whoever is in my life does it this way, why should I do it a different way? They're likely to keep those throughout their lives. So there are some financial responsibility resources. I'm going to share these too over here in the chat, in the toolkit that help go into that. Some activities and things that you all can do is engage families in financial literacy and financial planning activities, right? So further down on the list, things like hosting family financial literacy nights, right? Invite a local bank come in. This goes into the sort of partnering with local institutions or financial institutions, co-host events. They can provide information or advice to family, have a college financial night. And, that's could be a really impactful event, right? Inviting in the community banks and things like that to help share resources. I'm sure they'd love to be a part of that with your program. Again, that concept of beginning early and repeating it often. And providing resources and support, right? If you're not able to get a bank to come in for an event, can you contact them? Hey, do you have any resources? Do you have brochures or information or things that we can share with our families and our community? Oh, I'm not sure who Little Flowers is, but thank you. I'm glad you're finding this helpful. The college application process, right? This is another major facet, right? So we're talking about visits and financial literacy, and these are the places that have big actions that we can take. So this process, of course, if you've gone to college, can be daunting, overwhelming, intimidating, and even more so for those students who are going through it for the first time. And well, obviously, right, they're all kind of going through it for the first time. But if they're going through it without parents or siblings who have gone before them and done it, so again, looking at those sort of first generation college going students which was me. And I can attest to that. That process was incredibly stressful. And that was a really long time ago. I'm in my 40s, so it was a very long time ago that I went to college, and I know it's not necessarily gotten any easier. If anything, it's just gotten more complicated. But this piece of the college preparation process, along with the financial aid, are the largest and most time-consuming steps, and they should be, right? But going into it prepared for that is a whole other question. And this process is something that students should be navigating throughout their whole time in high school. There are so many steps involved in the application process, each with their own set of tasks and requirements. So it's important for students to get and stay organized to manage the process from start to finish. So that's one place we can really help, is like helping them to get organized. Let's figure out, start with a checklist. There are lots of links in the toolkit for checklists that exists. Again, we're trying not to reinvent the wheel everywhere, but really use the great resources that have already been created by folks and organizations. So there's links to checklists out there that'll be helpful, even if they don't include every step of the process, or, you know, it's a good general place to start. You can kind of hack together a few of them if you want something a little more customized. Reviewing applications together could be helpful, right? Before even starting to work on them, becoming familiar with the kinds of questions, the requirements. Again, this goes back to that practice, giving youth opportunities to get familiar with it before they have to do it, before it's a required, you know, before the time says, okay, it's time to apply to colleges. So doing those practice rounds can be really helpful. Providing coaching on how to make an application great, right? And that's just some of that, you know, adult perspective. And you may have a really strong background in college applications or college preparedness. And so really utilizing that, someone in your organization may have that. Again, this practice, right? Giving them opportunities to write college essays and give prompts for those, and just practice writing, right? Just writing. It doesn't even have to be through this lens of college essays. College interviews, right? Interviewing. How do you talk to adults when you have to present information about yourself and be, you know, sort of professional in that? How does it take a professional tone? How do you really build up yourself without feeling like you're bragging? Or, you know, I know that youth I've worked with, that's something they really get in their heads about is, you know, I don't want to say that stuff about myself. But, you know, it's like, no, this is the time to say those things about yourself. This is the time to really, you know, talk proudly about the things that you've done. And then be prepared to help youth make decisions when the acceptances come in or when they don't come in, right? If they didn't get accepted in, you know, how can we help them pivot? How can we support them and let them know that they're still cared for and they're still valuable, even though maybe they didn't get into their dream school? And again, these pieces are all going to depend on what age youth you're working with. But you can see, right, if we leave all of this work to high school, which I believe schools do for the most part, we leave all this work for high school. It's so much to do in 4 years when you're trying to have a social life and learn all the content knowledge that you have to learn. And, you know, it's just too much. If we spread it out and we do more across the board and start earlier and earlier, we give them a better foundation for when we get to high school. I already kind of have an idea and a sense of who I am, what I want to do with my life, the kinds of values I see in myself, the kinds of things I want to see in my future. And you can start to then build from that foundation versus coming in, you know, kind of blind to that process, and just having all of this information dumped on top of you can be just completely paralyzing. Thank you, Mary. So Mary dropped in the chat, everyone should take a look at this. She said they use Fulton Bank, and she's given some contact information there for Kevin, who is an express checking account for youth, and they have a secondary type identification that can be used. This is huge, especially if you have YouthWorks youth or things like that. These are all pieces. I know YouthWorks tries to do a good job of like incorporating financial literacy and helping you set up accounts and things like that, but how to get youth paid and how to get youth organizing their money and accounts can be a real challenge. She says they've come out to our youth in Sandtown and signed them up for bank accounts that's awesome. So they don't have to go to check cashing stores that charge fees on top of that. Thank you, Mary. That's super helpful. That could be a great resource for anybody who is looking for a contact for that. Sounds like you've been able to build a good partnership with them already. So a few more activities and resources specifically. So Toolkit activities, there's a third activity in that high school sequence that we talked about. So following the interest inventory and the career alignment research is an activity called Pathway Profiles. And this final activity in that sequence asks youth to take what they've learned so far about careers of interest and begin researching the educational pathways into those careers. So really giving that, if I want to be, and we'll just keep with the example of a marine biologist, if I want to be a marine biologist, what do I have to do to get there? Because that's so important. I don't feel like high schools often do a great job of, if you want to do X, Y, or Z, these are the things you should be looking for. And it's not entirely their fault. They just don't have to, they don't have a lot of bandwidth, right? And they're experiencing a lot of the same, they just have a lot of systemic issues. But so the goal of this activity is to really give youth a starting point for researching those post-secondary opportunities that are of interest to them and aligned with their interests and skill sets and what they want for themselves. There is a college matchmaking guide in the toolkit as well. So again, I'm gonna just drop these links in the path or in the chat. The college matchmaking guide, this is guides students through a series of activities using tools that come from College Board that will aid them in researching and selecting colleges and universities that would be a good fit for them. And there's loads of linked external activities in the toolkit. So I'm just pulling highlights. There's so much more than what we're able to talk about in the time we have today. Another resource, there are youth-facing resources. We've talked about some of these already, but there's college fair questions, right? So if you're doing college fair, that would be another great thing you could do, is do a little college fair, host a little college fair for your programs and for the youth in your programs. And that might just look like inviting local colleges. Don't leave out any of the community colleges or junior colleges, because those are valuable too. You can even broaden this and invite, a variety of post-secondary education options, right? And invite some of those technical schools to be a part, or military options and things like that. And the other youth-facing resource that I wanted to highlight is something called Making a College Transition Plan. And that's linked in the chat as well. And this is really helping youth to think about, what is it going to be like for me to leave high school and potentially leave home and go to college? It's a whole resource on supporting youth in that process. So Mary also has said in the chat, there's a need to help our kids stay in college. Yes, and that's part of that college transition plan, Mary. That was a perfect segue. It really hones in, and there's a youth-facing piece of that, and then there's also a program-facing piece of that. The program-facing piece of that talks about how you might consider doing check-ins with those youth that have gone off to college, right? And I know this is like a bandwidth issue, right? How much staffing are you going to have to support that effort? But if that is part of really your programs, again, in the beginning, we talked about getting really clear on what it looks like for your program to support this college readiness piece and the going off to college piece. And so that might be a priority that you want to focus on. It really has some suggestions and ideas in there for how you might be able to support youth as they are there. And it goes into talking about how do they find mental health resources and wellness resources on campus, what are the other support resources, and really making that a huge part of that, like planning going into college, so that they can make the most of those resources that are available to them that most youth don't know about. When we trained a group of folks as ambassadors on the toolkit, and we all talked about, like, yeah, sure, those resources were all on their college campuses and none of us really knew where they were or how to access them. So making sure that's not the case for the youth we're sending out into the world. Yeah, many make it and fail out because of various reasons. Right, we can't solve all the problems, but we can. There are some good resources in here that can help us try. or at least try to make some inroads in that. That's a great point. Thanks, Mary. All right, so I want to give us a few minutes to chat. So I invite you to unmute yourself and share, or you can share in the chat box, whichever is best for you. But let's talk about what has worked for you. What have you integrated? How have you integrated college readiness into your programs, specifically your summer programs, any kind of program, in a past program? What have some of your experiences been, and what has worked for you? So again, invitation to come off mute and share, or share in the chat box if you've got something.
I'll just come off mute and I put in a chat back. Honestly, I haven't done a good job. That's why I'm here today. I want to do a good job, but I don't have the resource. And I really want to take to you talking about the bandwidth. That really resonated with me, because if I try to focus on too much, then I become ineffective on what I do well.
Yeah.
So I would almost say that there needs to be another whole chunk of funding opportunity for me to hire someone just for this alone. You know what I mean? You can't do all this.
You can't do it all,
Oh
right?
my God. But I'm interested in seeing if you said you had some Toolkit ambassadors, and my mind immediately went to hiring youth and paying them to learn your toolkit and to be that voice and take that message around to the different schools at whatever way. I think that's a thing. I think that's something.
Yes.
I don't know
yes.
if you agree.
That, Mary.
We need to do that, because we will provide jobs. They themselves will become more knowledgeable, and they would become that resource that, that can relate to their generation.
Yes.
To be honest, I'm a returning student. After 30 years, I went back to school. And when you were talking about this for the kids, I'm like, there are women that that want to go back, and they are trying to get their kids to school. But we see some success in on Facebook of people graduating with their children, having been teenage mothers, having been young mothers who didn't have the resources or the time. That would be awesome if that could also be included some kind of way, integrated into what you're doing.
Yeah. So the ambassador program, just to speak on that a little bit, we trained, initially we trained 10 youth development folks, and these are folks working in the community already to be ambassadors on the toolkit. They were trained in depth on the toolkit. Some of them have since moved or dropped off. And so it hasn't been necessarily the most successful program, but the concept of it being that they would then provide training to community organizations, to other folks who wanted to implement pieces of the toolkit and really get training more in depth than what we're doing today, right? Or potentially even more focused or more customized than what we're doing today. But we have since signed on with Leaders of Youth Tomorrow. What is it? It's LTYC is the acronym for the organization. And I'm sorry that I'm butchering their name, as training partners for the toolkit. So I'm actually going to be providing training to them this summer. And then late in the summer, start of the school year, they're going to be able to actually deploy folks to provide training for organizations. So Mary, if you're really interested, at the end of the slides, there's a link to the website. It's actually on the CCR toolkit page as well. That has if you're interested in training, let us know here button. And so you can drop that there. Let me grab that link again really quick. So this bit.ly link that I just put in the chat there takes you directly to the toolkit page. And there's a button there where you can express your interest in training, and Ellie will reach out to you and arrange something. But I love the idea of training youth, and whether they're slightly older youth or, youth who are going through I just think that's such a great way to empower them in this process, and really utilize the value of the toolkit, right? There's a ton of information in there. That's at least a starting point, right? And Mary, I'm with you. I don't necessarily think in my past work we've done the best job we could have, but it also, it takes a lot of resources, not just, tangible resources and guides and things like that, but it takes human resources to do a good job in this work. Anyone else want to share?
Hi, so we're here at Let's Go. So our high school program really hasn't it's a very recent sort of innovation for us. I think like we recently just hired like the high school portion. So just that portion is really starting to like sort of kick off. But for the high school students that we do have that we did retain from our like middle school programs, a lot of the stuff that helps is sort of mentoring them and just kind of checking in, making sure like, hey, if you need someone to like read your college apps, we're available, right? Like if you wanted us to look over your applications, if you have any questions about the application process, we can help do that research for you. But I think I've learned a lot, particularly about like, because our middle school programs, I think, are focused a lot on sort of STEM content delivery, in terms of teaching them STEM concepts, where I think we can start pushing in the sort of college career readiness portion a little earlier into our middle school programs as well. And I think that would be very useful. And that's something that I've taken from this presentation.
That's great. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I think, at the very least, that's a thing we can do is just offer our support, right? How can I help? And not just how can I help, because that puts the onus on them, but having, scheduling, even if it's just on your own calendar, right? Saying, okay, I'm going to check in with X, Y, and Z youth on this, that, and the other day. And I'm going to ask for specifics, right? How's your college application going? Right? What can I help you with? Where are you stuck? Right. So it doesn't put the ownership or the responsibility on them to come forward, because they may not take you up on that, or may not know exactly what their hang up is. So if you can get really clear on like, these are some check-in points we want to have. And, if you've got a lot of youth, right, if staff are able to sort of divvy that up, okay, I'm going to check in with 3 youth, you're going to check in with 3 youth, et cetera. And have some regular, these are the questions you should be asking, and getting really targeted and specific, not just the like, what can I help you with? Because I think that can be intimidating sometimes. But that's great. Thank you, Michael. And I'm glad you're walking away with some stuff for your middle schoolers. I think it's just so important. There's just so much information that they have to, learn about. There's so much they have to learn about to do it all in 4 years and then do it in 4, that's such a short timeline. Yeah. Anyone else?
Hey, Steph, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So this is Debbie from Let's Go. I was thinking one of the other things we did last summer, which was really impactful, was when our high school students did like a career exploration project. Once they identified their kind of targeted career interest, we worked to use our network to find a professional in that field that they could do like a one-on-one interview with.
Yes.
And that was really powerful because we were able to we worked really hard to match demographics, kind of location, so kind of things that would make it really impactful for them. So it was a lift for us as an organization, but I know our students were just really excited. And because we could do it virtually, I mean, we use resources from all over the country.
Right.
We had one guy do it he was in the airport waiting to fly to Singapore, and he's like, I could do it, but I have to do it at this time. And we're like, yeah, we can make that work. And so, but I think that was kind of an interesting way to look, instead of just like our typical college and career guest speaker presentations.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's, if you have the bandwidth to be able to pull that off and do something like that, can be super impactful, right? And then, just arm your kids ready with like, hey, get your questions ready. Let's prep that ahead of time so that you've got the opportunity to really make the most of that experience, and the most of that person's time. That's so great. Thank you for sharing, Debbie.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's another thing we talked in Monday's presentation, which was focused on career readiness. We talked about, career panels, right? And having folks come in and talk about the work they do. Well, you can absolutely do that with college too, right? Invite college students, particularly if you've got youth who have sort of graduated from your program and are in college or out in the world of post-secondary education, whatever that landscape looks like for them. Bring them back in, have them share with the youth what their experience is like, what their hangups were, what their, just any opportunity for youth to get the experience of it, right? It can be so intimidating when I don't know what college looks like. I've never visited a college campus. I've never, how many youth are we asking to go to college who have no idea what that means? And that's just, it's so unfortunate. It doesn't have to be that way. So on that note, anyone else like to share anything before we wrap up?
I actually have a schedule of a few presenters coming in just to speak to my students.
Great.
Even though it's jewelry making, I wanted them to see like other aspects of it, So one person deals with videography and the technology piece, so they can see somebody that's working in that field. And then my actual jewelry instructor from Towson, he teaches metalsmith. I think that's really good for them to see that aspect as well. And a principal in Baltimore City she has a program that focuses on finding joy and peace and ways to combat anxiety and things like that. So I feel like even though I don't have a full career readiness piece, having those people come in this summer probably will be a great start.
Absolutely.
To implementing this.
Absolutely. And you've got such a wide variety, right? I remember we had a youth in our program ages ago now, and her father told her she wanted to be I forget what her career aspirations were, to be honest, but her dad was like, yeah, but enroll in this program and learn how to make websites, and enroll in this program and learn how to make videos, right? All while you're in high school, because if you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to whatever business you want to do these days with all the media tools we have and the media access we have. He was like, if you can do it yourself and you don't have to pay someone else to do it, you should do it. And just that, like teaching them not only the jewelry techniques, but right, a videographer, a photographer coming in and talking about the portion of the work that they do, right? That might actually be more interesting. Jewelry might be the hook that got them in, but offering them a variety of, this is what it goes into support a jewelry making business, right? Entrepreneurship, right? Okay, maybe they get hooked by jewelry, but that's not the thing that they're most passionate about. And later on, they decide, I want to, run my own business of some other sort. And just introducing them to those pathways is so, so important. So Diane, don't underestimate the work you're already doing and the things you're doing. You've already got a good instinct for this. And it's more about just building your capacity slowly. And again, focusing in, getting clear on what it is you want to do, and try not to get distracted by the pressure to do it all for everybody.
Yeah, that's the biggest part, because there's so much out there. So thank you.
And
for
there's
that.
so much need. There's so much need, right? And so it can be really, I like to think that we in the OST community are, we lead with our hearts, right? So it can really pull at those heartstrings when you want to do more and more and more and more. But then you just burn yourself out. So be careful of that. Thanks for sharing, Diane, and everyone else. All right, we're going to move on to wrap up. So I'm going to do two things. First of all, I'm going to give you, this is an evaluation form that we're going to ask everyone to fill out. So the link is in the chat there. If you don't mind, that helps us provide, gives us good, valuable feedback on today's session that we can make changes in the future or, really hone this and make it better for folks going forward. I'm also going to share there's the PDF for the webinar today that has all of the college readiness links in it. And I'm actually going to share the career readiness link sheet as well. So you've got both of those. So right now in the chat, go ahead, jump in there and download those links or download those PDFs. Make sure you grab those because they've got everything we shared today. And then are there any questions in our last 2 minutes together? All right, I'm not hearing any questions or seeing anything, so I'm going to jump here. Thank you so much for being here this morning. It's been great to hear about some of your programs and the things that you're doing. I wish you luck as you try to implement more college readiness, and use this as a resource, please. So here are some links on this slide. Again, the toolkit is linked in the in those PDFs. If you are going through the toolkit and you've got information or you've got some feedback, this is missing, I'd really like to see this. Do you have any additional resources on X, Y, or Z? You can email info@mdoutofschooltime.org. Let me just copy that, put that in the chat there. And if you visit mostnetwork.org, you can get access to all the things that they're doing and the work that they do to support out of school time programs and organizations. If you've got questions, please reach out to that info and you can follow up there. But otherwise, thank you. Good luck with your programs this summer. And I hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.